hard for us to imagine today when orange juice is everywhere, but at the time, orange was an exotic fruit that most Europeans would not have had regular access to. Bonjour, and welcome to My Tiny Bottles, the project where I'm exploring my grandmother's legacy of miniature liquor bottles, one tiny bottle at a time. I'm your host, Tammy Coxon. Bottle number 54, Cointreau, is one of the oldest looking bottles I've come across so far. Also one of the tiniest. While there's no volume measure on it, it's probably only around 30 mils rather than the standard 50 mil size for minis. It's also got a really unusual foil closure with little tabs on the side for opening. It's a fun one, as is the story of Cointreau. Unlike some of my bottles, Cointreau is still around today to promote their own origin story. According to their website, the distillery was founded in 1849 amid the euphoria of the French Industrial Revolution by Adolphe Cointreau. He applied his expertise working with fruit as a confectioner to making fruit liqueurs, starting with cherry and expanding from there. Business was booming, so he brought his brother, Edouard Jean Cointreau, into the business. According to a charming Food and Wine interview with sixth-generation family member and current brand ambassador Alfred Cointreau, it was Edouard Jean's son, Edouard, who focused the company on orange liqueur starting in 1875. It's hard for us to imagine today when orange juice is everywhere, but at the time, orange was an exotic fruit that most Europeans would not have had regular access to. Edouard wanted to make that flavor more readily available as a liqueur and traveled the world to find just the right combination of oranges to make it so. By 1885, he succeeded, and Cointreau Triple Sec was released to the world. Yep, Triple Sec. Cointreau claims to be the originator of the Triple Sec style of orange liqueur. Cointreau did produce an orange liqueur before then, but they, like everyone else, called it Curaçao. The Dutch had originated that style of orange liqueur in the 1600s, flavored with the peel of a bitter orange from the island of Curaçao. For a couple hundred years, Curaçao was what everyone called their orange liqueur. This included Cointreau, whose orange liqueur was sold as Curaçao before 1869, and then as Curaçao Triple Sec until Triple Sec became the sole descriptor in 1885. These days, the words Triple Sec don't exist on a Cointreau label at all. That term has been relegated to bottom shelf bottles, typically between 11 and 15% alcohol, leaving not much room for sophisticated flavors from the distillation of orange peels. Cointreau didn't want anyone to confuse them with that product, so by the early 20th century, the term was completely gone from the label. This makes it a little like Di Serono, which no longer wants to be known as Amaretto, as I talked about in bottle number 10. Cointreau's claim to have originated the term is challenged by another French liqueur maker, Combier, who claims to have been using it since 1835. The two companies also have very different takes on what the term triple sec even means. According to Cointreau, they invented the term to showcase that their liqueur was 3 times more concentrated in orange flavoring than the other orange liqueurs on the market. Combier says they used the term to mean triple distilled. Other people figure it must have to do with the use of 3 different kinds of oranges. And sec means dry in French, so you'd think it would refer to sweetness level, but there's no evidence that that's what they were going for. Basically, nobody knows, and it doesn't really matter. As I say in my cocktail classes, orange liqueur is one of the most confusing categories. Triple sec, Cointreau, Curaçao, blue Curaçao. There are no clear definitions or lines between them, and when it comes to cocktails, they can often be used interchangeably. My advice is that if you have room for only one in your liquor cabinet, it should be Cointreau, which I find to be the most versatile. Which is why I was especially excited to see this little bottle of it turn up. The Cointreau we drink today is not quite the same as the original. They did modify the recipe to be less sweet in 1923. But they claim that it has stayed the same ever since. And in that Food and Wine article I talked about before, Alfred Cointreau says, you can taste the Cointreau of this year, last year, and 15 years ago. It's the same. How about 60 years ago, Alfred? As best as I can tell from staring at all the vintage bottles I can find online, this tiny bottle of Cointreau is probably from the 1960s. It's had some leakage or evaporation, so I suspect it will have a little oxidation, but I am definitely excited to taste this one. So Alfred Cointreau, if you're watching this episode and want to taste some old Cointreau, drop a comment below or send me a message at My Tiny Bottles on social media. If you're not Alfred Cointreau but are or know someone who should taste one of my bottles, let me know. I'm always looking for fun people to taste with. There's a contact form and lots of stuff at mytinybottles.com. Cheers!